Hi, uh, my name is Mike Zonta. I'm a mentor with the Prosperos, and this morning on July 12th, 2015, we had an online Sunday meeting, and we recorded it on YouTube dutifully, and I'd never done that before, and it was 48 minutes, so that may have been a problem, but the other problem may have been that I took too long to upload it at the end of after the talk had finished, and then YouTube said, well, too bad, it's gone. So I'm re-recording the talk, and we'll see what happens. So as I said earlier this morning, I was relaying a story about riding home on Muni here in San Francisco on one of our streetcars, and hoping for I was kind of tired and hoping for like a quick nap, and hoping for a lucid dream during this quick nap. Sometimes I've found that you can take a real quick nap on Muni and get some really interesting information, at the risk of missing your stop. But that's not what happened, because a guy sat behind me who was speaking about 10 times as loud as he needed to speak, and he was talking about philosophy. He was talking about Immanuel Kant and other great philosophers, and his conclusion to his partner next door was, at the end of this long diatribe, his conclusion was, if you knew all this shit, you'd be unfuckwithable. And so I thought that was a really nice way to put what we're trying to do in the Prosperos and other schools of this sort. If you know enough about yourself, and if you delve deeply enough into yourself, into your own philosophy, you will be unfuckwithable. So one more F-bomb before I continue. I was in Berkeley a couple of days ago and saw a young man wearing a hat, and on the hat it said two words. It said "fuck cancer." So I thought that was a nice sentiment, and I agree entirely. By the way, I'm not wearing any pants. No, I'm kidding. I am wearing pants. But you don't know for sure. So if things get boring, you can always think of that. All right. Now the text today is based on, or I mean the talk today is based on two texts that we listened to and discussed at the online Monday night listening and dialogue group. And the first one is Carl Gustav Jung, Quantum Physics and the Spiritual Mind, A Mystical Vision of the 21st Century, which is an abstract by Diogo Valadas Ponte and Lothar Schaefer. And then the second text is Dr. Leonard Schlane's The Alphabet versus the Goddess, the conflict between word and image. This is a book that he wrote maybe back in 2009, I think. And he has since passed on, but he lived here in the San Francisco area, and he was a brain surgeon at, I believe, UCSF, but anyhow, some hospital here. So I'm going to start by reading a couple of these paragraphs from the abstract. It's maybe quite a long abstract, and if you want to read the whole thing, you can Google Bathtub Bulletin and click on the tab Blogs, on the Blogs tab, and then search for Carl Gustav Jung. So here's the first paragraph. Into the totalitarian materialistic environment of the early 20th century, Carl Gustav Jung had the courage to propose that our mind is guided by a system of forms, the archetypes, which are powerful even though they don't carry any mass or energy, and which are real even though they are invisible. The archetypes exist, as Jung described, in a psychic system of a collective, universal, and impersonal nature. Out of this system, the invisible forms can appear in our mind and guide our imagination, perception, and thinking. So isn't that interesting? This is formless force, basically, is what they're talking about. Then the next paragraph. As it turns out, Carl Jung's revolutionary views of the human mind are in perfect agreement with the discoveries of quantum physics, which during the last century also came as a shock because they revealed the fundamental errors of classical physics and led to a radical change in the Western view of the world. The quantum phenomena now force us to think that the basis of the material world is non-material, and that there is a realm of the world that we can't see because it doesn't consist of material things, but of non-material forms. Isn't that interesting, too? Non-material forms. Non-material forms. So mental forms, psychic forms, archetypal forms, or, again, formless force. So then the abstract goes on, all atoms consist of a positively charged nucleus, which contains most of the mass of an atom, and of electrons, which are somehow arranged in the space surrounding the nucleus. Electrons are tiny elementary particles. They have a definite mass, and whenever we see one, it appears as a tiny dot, for example, as a flash on a TV screen or a little mark on a photographic film. So isn't that interesting? They are just like us. When we identify as a wave, we are identifying as consciousness, as the ability to create and govern thought. When we identify as a particle, we identify as ego, or as me or you in a moment in time. And sometimes we get caught in that moment and repeat it over and over again, forgetting that we are really a wave. So the Prosperos teaches that our identity is consciousness, the ability to create and govern thought, which, sounds really acceptable, perfectly fine. Nobody has a problem with that, except that what is not said is that our identity excludes everything else. So an easy test the next time you're feeling out of sorts, ask yourself, am I functioning from my ability to create and govern thought, or am I functioning from something else? If it's something else, you have the right to dismiss it immediately. It's not real, and it's not a part of who you are, unless you want to hang on to it for some reason. But that's always our choice. Okay, the abstract goes on. It is no accident that the development of psychology as a science took a quantum leap after 1900 CE, 1900, the Common Era, when the era of the classical sciences came to an end and the quantum era began. Jung's view of the human psyche presupposes a structure of the universe that is in perfect agreement with the quantum universe, but impossible in Newton's world. For example, Jung's assumption that an invisible part of the world exists, which doesn't consist of material things but of forms, the archetypes, is unacceptable in a Newtonian universe in which all phenomena depend on the properties of matter. Isn't that interesting? In effect, under Newtonian law, only matter mattered. The appearance, the abstract goes on, the appearance of the archetypes in our mind shows our connection with a transpersonal order. Beyond the narrow confines of our personal psyche, Jung pointed out, the collective unconscious is a boundless expanse full of unprecedented uncertainty, with apparently no insight and no inside and no outside, no above and no below, no here and no there, no mine and no thine, no good and no bad, where I am indivisibly this and that, where I experience the other in myself, and the other than myself experiences me. There I am utterly one with the world, so much a part of it that I forget all too easily who I really am. Isn't that interesting? Gives me a flashback, as it were, of years ago when I used to get high. Okay, the abstract continues. Idealist philosophers and mystics have pursued such ideas through the ages. In the 19th century, for example, George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel taught that absolute spirit is the primary structure of the universe. Everything that exists is the actualization of spirit, and everything is connected with it. Spirit is everything, creates everything, and thinking and being, subject and object, the real and the ideal, the human and the divine are all one. Thus, Hegel concluded, our thinking is the thinking of the cosmic spirit, who is thinking in us. Isn't that interesting? Well, more than interesting, really. The word consciousness there, the abstract continues, derives from the Latin con and scientia, and it means a state of knowing together. Interestingly, when we speak of our consciousness and that of other people, we always speak of our consciousness and never use the plural form, speaking of our consciousnesses. There is no plural form because there's only one consciousness, the cosmic consciousness. Isn't that interesting? In a Newtonian world, synchronistic events are impossible. In a quantum world, they must occur. We can't know what causes such events because their causes, if any, are non-empirical. That is, cannot be seen with the naked eye. However, we can understand that synchronistic events are possible because the universe is an indivisible wholeness that is aware of its processes like a cosmic spirit. Thus, we are led again to Hegel's thesis that a cosmic spirit is thinking in us. I was watching a documentary the other night about Carol Burnett, and she was talking about in August of 1954 she had just moved to New York to try to make it in show business. She was interested in Broadway, really, and at that time. And her family back in California was saying, "Oh no, come back! Don't go out there. It's too far away. It's going to be too difficult." And Carol said it was raining at the time, and she said, "Good things always happen to me when it rains." And in fact, it was raining so much that it was a hurricane, and the name of the hurricane was Hurricane Carol. So she took that as a sign, and it certainly was. It's a synchronicity, and no doubt you've all had them too. So the next paragraph in the abstract, the view that reality has a non-empirical background can be found at various times in the history of philosophy. We find it, for example, in the thesis of the Greek Pythagorean philosopher Timaeus of Locri, around 400 BCE. God is a circle, he wrote, whose center is everywhere and circumference nowhere. Isn't that interesting? Jung's teaching is an incredible achievement and a blessing for humanity. He has shown that we are connected with a non-empirical realm of the universe in which we can find our cosmic task. Denying the transcendent aspects of our nature can lead to serious problems for our physical health and spiritual well-being. Our cosmic task isn't the task of slaves who have to serve their creator. We are not the slaves of the cosmic spirit, but rather we are the cosmic spirit. And I think that's really important to find. It's been important for me to find my cosmic task, and I think I know what it is, and I think I'm carrying it out. But that was the most important thing that I've had to discover over the last couple of decades, I guess. What is my unique cosmic task, which may be entirely different than what I started out thinking my cosmic task was. And I'm sure something like that is probably accurate for anybody that's listening to this as well. So Newtonian religions like Islam and Christianity and Judaism are based on a belief in a material world and a God without. A quantum approach to religion bases itself on non-empirical reality. That is, we can't see it with the naked eye. So this non-empirical reality we can call God if we want, or infinite mind or the universe expressing itself through you and through me. In Newtonian politics, even in modern-day democracies such as we have here in the United States, they base themselves on leaders-centered leadership as opposed to group-centered leadership. Quantum politics bases itself on consciousness as critical mass, decision-making based on the wisdom of crowd, as Joseph Surowiecki put in his 2004 book of the same name, which is right here. So it is Surowiecki's hypothesis that given a large enough group and a large enough and diverse enough group, that there is more wisdom in a group than in an individual. He began the book with an experiment from 1906 by a scientist named Francis Galton, who went to a regional fair in Plymouth, England, and noticed this contest that was going on. There was 800 people, and each of them were submitting their guess as to the weight of a large ox. They were experts and non-experts alike, and Galton said the average competitor was probably as well fitted for making a just estimate of the weight of the ox as an average voter is of judging the merits of most political issues on which he votes. Galton took the 787 votes, 13 were illegible, and averaged them out. And the average was 1,197 pounds, and the bull weighed 1,198 pounds. So Surowiecki's conclusion, under the right circumstances, that is, a group being large enough and diverse enough to avoid groupthink, groups are remarkably intelligent and often smarter than the smartest people in them. So the change of consciousness happens from the bottom up. Recently we've had the issue of the Confederate flag in South Carolina, and it came as a surprise to many of us that that flag was still flying. Who knew? I mean, this is, everybody in South Carolina knew, but I really hadn't given it a second thought. But as I was discussing this with a friend of mine at a cafe, I told him that as soon as I became aware that that Confederate flag was still flying, I knew that the decision had already been made to take it down, and not by the South Carolina legislature or the governor or anything, but the decision in consciousness had already been made. You could feel it. You could feel it from San Francisco. You just knew, if you were listening, that flag there, we had had enough. That we had reached a critical mass, and that no matter what, basically, that flag was going to come down quickly. Now, another example might be cafes in general. I mean, I don't know when everybody started to go to cafes here in this country, but it seemed like all of a sudden everybody was going to Starbucks or something comparable to that, and spending $3 or $4 for a latte, and nobody knew what a latte was like, let's say 30 years ago. But maybe sometime in the 90s, I don't know when, everybody started going to Starbucks or something like that, and that's good for Starbucks, and maybe it's good for society. But just like there's a group consciousness that made the decision that we're going to start doing that now, because maybe because we have laptops, I don't know, but but it just happened so quickly. It amazed me. Another example might be the gay marriage issue, which In 2004, Bush used as a wedge issue to try to get the anti-gay marriage vote to come out and at the same time help him in his re-election for president, and it worked. 11 states had gay marriage on the issue, and I don't think any of them won. I'm not sure, but anyhow, George Bush got reelected, so that was the important thing to him. And now, of course, we have about 60% approval of gay marriage. So this change in consciousness took, well, a few years, but nonetheless, it happened from the bottom up. It didn't happen from the bottom down. Obama had his evolution in consciousness because of the bottom up, not because of him having the evolution on his own. He had the evolution in consciousness when he could see that everybody else had this evolution in consciousness. And one other example I wanted to give of this consciousness leading the politicians rather than the other way around. And that was when Obama was considering going into Syria. This was before ISIS, and Obama was considering going into Syria without congressional approval, just on his own, like Bush did to Iraq. And then the British Parliament got around to voting on the issue and said, no, we're not going to do that. And everybody said, oh, this is a big defeat for Obama. But instead of seeing it as a defeat for Obama, we need to see it as a victory for democracy. Now, I don't know what's going on over there now and what kind of solution consciousness can come up with, but there's some solution that will probably come up from the people rather than the leaders. So that's the point of what I'm trying to say here, is that it's not so much important the current events in the world, the actual events of the world, but the underlying consciousness that is directing those events. That's what's important. Now we have a 2016 presidential election that's coming up, and everybody's interested in the horse race. You know, on the Republican side, there's 17 people running for president, and on the Democratic side, there's 3 or 4. And so that's all they're talking about is the horse race, and not even not even what issues are important. It's not a matter of discussing where is the consciousness of the country on immigration, for example, or where is the consciousness of the country on guns, or where is the consciousness of the country on any other number of issues. It's a matter of, you know, who's going to appeal to who's going to win, basically. So the point I'm trying to make is that things change when consciousness changes, and leaders change when the consciousness of the people changes. According to Tim Roper of the University of Sussex in the UK, he says birds flying in a flock aren't following a leader, but monitoring the motions of those around them for variations in the flight path. When more than 50% have moved in a particular direction, even if it's only a quarter inch in one direction or another, the entire flock suddenly veers off that way. It's the same with fish and even with swarms of gnats. Roper said that his colleagues were telling him that from ants to gorillas, democracy is the norm among animals, just like with indigenous societies. So if you're a Prosperos student, it all gets back to the FYL group, Find Yourself and Live group, where we practice group-centered leadership. And we call them listening and dialogue groups now, but we practice group-centered leadership rather than leadership-centered leadership, because that's a way that everybody acts as the moderator, everybody acts as the observer, and a lot more can get done in a group than with a leader-centered leadership. A lot more can get done with group-centered leadership than leadership-centered leadership. And that's why with our organization, the HighWatch Translation Service, where we send out HighWatch requests, or we send out translation requests to 24 people about whatever people want to have translated, and the idea of having several people work on a translation is that you'll get 24 different versions, 24 different perspectives on not only what to translate, but what kind of translation you get, what kind of conclusion you arrive at. The same thing with tag team translation. We're having a fall series in the Prosperos called the Tag Team Fall Series, and we're going to have different teachers teach. Like instead of having one person teach 6 lessons of translation, we're having 6 people teach each a different lesson. And the idea is that this will spark new and exciting approaches to the same subject, and thereby engage people more and engage the teachers more. Also, I've been active recently with Occupy San Francisco, and Occupy San Francisco is well known for so-called leaderless groups or leadership by consensus. It's a very difficult process, especially when people don't have any training in it. But it's not a matter of anarchy. Or in the usual sense of anarchy. It's a matter of not being hierarchical. So we want more and more to get away from vertical leadership to horizontal leadership, because vertical leadership is not as effective as horizontal leadership. This is my visual aid. So there's another group out of Buenos Aires, Argentina, called Democracy Operating System, which is trying to get democracy online to govern either a country, a city, or an agency or a group. It's a way of discussing online, voting online, and bypassing the bought and paid for politicians. So what they are trying to do is what they call hacking the system, and so they actually ran someone for parliament in Argentina. This person got 20,000 votes, which was not enough to win a seat. But if and when somebody does win a seat in Argentina or California or the United States of America, the idea is that they will be held responsible to those who signed up for the Net Party online and who vote on issues online, and therefore the person that is voted into office has a direct responsibility to those people who voted online, rather than to lobbyists who are paying for their next election. So this is something that I think is very exciting, and that if you're interested in that, Google Democracy OS or Democracy Operating System, and you'll find out all about it. Now, a couple of weeks ago, when I first gave this talk, this is my Marco Rubio moment. When I first gave this talk, the Golden State Warriors had just won the NBA Finals, or the championship, and their motto is "Strength in Numbers." And this is a quote from Ann Killian, sports writer for the San Francisco Chronicle, speaking about Steph Curry, the team's most valuable player. And she says, and it makes it that much more special to have the championship delivered by Curry, by the little man who changed everything. What an NBA superstar is supposed to look like, how the Warriors were supposed to perform, a player who doesn't try to be the best, who tries to make everyone else the best. And Stephen Curry, Stephen Curry, hasn't even taken translation or RHS or had training in group dynamics. These are all Prospero classes. So it's not the most difficult thing to achieve. It just requires acting like a wave and not some hotshot particle. June 15th, 2015 was the 800th birthday of the Magna Carta and the accompanying Charter of the Forest. And from the democracyos.org website, we get this declaration. We need a global Magna Carta for the web in order to articulate the rights of users for privacy, security, freedom of expression, and other fundamental rights on the web. In the spirit of open, multi-stakeholder process of the web, it seems like such a document should be directly crowdsourced from the citizens of the web globally. Principles of privacy, free speech, and responsible anonymity, the impact of copyright laws, and the cultural, societal issues around the ethics of technology, amongst many other topics, need serious, responsible, and urgent consideration. So I think that's very interesting. We are in the process of transforming from a hierarchical to a vertical, from a hierarchical, vertical society to a more horizontal one. And thanks in great part to the internet and social media. It's wonderful, and it's going to help us make the next step in consciousness that we need to make, which is horizontal, not vertical. Horizontal government, not vertical government. So the next text we want to discuss is the book, The Alphabet versus the Goddess, The Conflict Between Word and Image by Dr. Leonard Shlain, and there's been a couple of YouTube lectures on that book as well, which you can find on YouTube or Google, The Alphabet versus the Goddess, and his name is Shlain, S-H-L-A-I-N. His basic premise is that with the invention of the alphabet and writing, that we place too much emphasis on the left hemisphere of the brain, which results in the taking away of women's rights and abhorrence of images and the disappearance of the goddess. He says the first book ever written with an alphabet was the Old Testament in 900 BC, and that the most important part of the Old Testament was the Ten Commandments. The first commandment is, I am the Lord thy God, and thou shalt have no other gods before me. And Dr. Shlain says that while most people would consider thou shalt not kill as right up there at number 2, the second commandment that Moses set down was, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Now Moses goes on to say in that same commandment, thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. So while most people assume that Moses was saying, don't make any images to bow down to, Shlain takes Moses literally, and maybe out of context, but literally, and because this is what the man said, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. That's a really interesting statement. And Shlain concludes that this is what God is saying. This is what this new 900 BC God is saying. No images, no art, no right hemisphere thinking. And Shlain asks, why is no art more important than no murder? Why is the no art commandment number 2, while no murder, thou shalt not kill, is number 6? Interesting questions. So this new God of the left hemisphere says, no art, no photography, no television, no movies, no YouTube. subjugation of women rather than worship of them. Schlein concludes that this was the beginning of the downfall of the goddess and therefore of the right hemisphere and its realm of influence, understanding patterns, connectedness, the concrete as opposed to the abstract. Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void." So this was the beginning of the written, word-built world, around 900 BC with the publication of the Old Testament. Then John comes along in the New Testament just to bring the point home, and he says in John 1:1, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." So for Prospero students, translation teaches us how to deconstruct and reconstruct our written word-built world and our oral word-built world. But usually we try to write our translations out. And Releasing the Hidden Splendor teaches us about the patterns, the emotional patterns of our life. Translation deals with the left hemisphere of our brain, and RHS, Releasing the Hidden Splendor, the right, according to this right hemisphere, left hemisphere theory. The left hemisphere deals primarily with masculine qualities. It is linear, sequential, reductionist, and abstract, while the right hemisphere deals primarily with feminine qualities. It is holistic, simultaneous, creative, concrete. The left hemisphere deals with doing, the right with being. So in a translation, we are seeking to find out the nature of truth. What is real? What is? What bees? Which is the feminine side of the equation, the feminine hemisphere of the brain. And my question is, where does doing fit in? Doesn't the doing hemisphere, the masculine hemisphere, have to be equally as important as the feminine in a translation? The reality is that there can be no doing without being, and vice versa. There can be no being without doing. There is no cause without effect. There is no effect without cause. There is no female without male. There is no male without female. Female is the cause. Male is the effect. Female is the being. Male is the doing. So in reality, Adam comes out of Eve, not the other way around. Just as in a fetus, we are all female until some Y chromosome kicks in about half of us. Everyone starts out as a woman in the womb. From the article Why Do Men Have Nipples by Ben Mock from livescience.com, he says, for the first several weeks, a developing embryo follows a female blueprint, from reproductive organs to nipples. Only after about 60 days does the hormone testosterone kick in for those of us with the Y chromosome, changing the genetic activity of cells in the genitals and brain. And Richard Bribicus, PhD from the Yale Reproductive Ecology Laboratory, puts it this way: we all have a genetic embryo. You have a set of male or female sex chromosomes, but the distinction doesn't kick in until your hormones enter the picture. Without hormones like testosterone, you would stay on the path to womanhood, and your body already has started developing by the time this decision was made, which means your lady parts were already beginning to form. So female being is the cause, male doing is the effect, regardless of what Carolyn Casey calls our temporary gender assignment. Being comes first. Being is the cause. The word effect derives from coming out of fact. Fect means fact. The etymology of the word fect is fact. So effect is coming out of fact or coming out of truth. Perfect is per truth. So straight thinking in the abstract leads to effects in the concrete or truth in the concrete. Healing doesn't happen in an absolute sense. In the Prosperos, we're not too big on healing, but it does happen in a relative sense. What is healed is our perspective, what we call our construct field or our C field, our thinking that we are separate from perfection, separate from truth, or separate from God. And the word do itself comes from deed, which means a fact, which is, again, truth. So Truth is not only all that is, it is necessarily all that does. So is Lillian DeWaters right? She wrote a book called The Finished Kingdom. So is it a finished kingdom? And if so, what's left to do? Well, nothing really. Which Jesus said, which of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit unto his stature? The apparent doing is in the realizing, the knowing that truth is all there is indeed. That is, knowing that truth is all that does. When I say truth is all that there is indeed, it means truth is all that does. Schlein says the right hemisphere is primarily concerned with being, and the left hemisphere is primarily concerned with doing. So if our translations are to be androgynous, we have to include not only being, but doing. But being comes first, not doing. It is automatic. There is no time lapse, no becoming. There's concept and percept. Whatever we conceive is what we perceive. Whatever we think is what we see. And so this is the basis of translation. If we can align our thinking with truth, then we will perceive truth. And that may result in what the world would call a healing, but really it's just getting our vision straight. I forget what the name of the eye doctor is, ophthalmologist. Maybe a visit to the ophthalmologist, metaphorically speaking, is what we're doing in a translation. All right, we think we are doing when we translate for a metanoia or a change, or when we RHS for a release, or when we use Crown Mysteries and command let there be and there is. These are all Prospero classes that hope I'm not speaking too much inside baseball, but if you're interested in the classes, there's a way to find out. So we are doing we are apparently doing to release the underlying being that has been there all along. We are not creating the universe, the truth. We are uncovering it, even though it appears that we are creating it. That's just looking at things from an egocentric perspective to think that we are the ones creating the universe. The left hemisphere gone wild. Think of images, statues being torn down by the Taliban in Afghanistan or by ISIS in Syria. Is even more dangerous and crazy than the right hemisphere gone wild. What after all is the right hemisphere gone wild? Too much art? I don't know what that could be. The goal for humankind, of course, is a balanced androgynous state of mind, which ultimately can only be ontological. So we must ask ourselves, where do we stand on the male-female balance? Has our left hemisphere gone wild? Is our right hemisphere more controlling than it should be? Ann Pulley, from an article called 5 American Sex Norms Europeans Probably Think Are Insane, says, research has shown that non-sexual physical contact has a profound impact on people's emotional and physical well-being. Despite this knowledge, our hypersexualized tendencies, America is one of the most touch-phobic countries in the world. A global study on touch rated the United States among the lowest touch countries studied. In contrast, the high-touch countries like Spain, France, Italy, and Greece. Some researchers think our fear of platonic touching actually leads to violence, particularly in young males. In one study, American adolescents were shown to touch each other far less and be more aggressive toward their peers compared with French adolescents. So that's why we'll be going over to Paris for the whole month of September and try to realign my touch my touch phobia. My friend Livia Malanofi once told me that she and her friend Elise used to sit around the kitchen table in Brooklyn just talking about how wonderful truth is. And I thought that's kind of a crazy idea when I first heard it, and I think that's really a wonderful thing to do, to sit around and talk about truth and how wonderful it is for those of you who are students of truth. If not, then look into it. But we need to not only stay in the abstract, we need to get into the concrete as well. We need the right hemisphere as well as the left. Remember, the right hemisphere is the concrete, the left is the abstract. And if you're a translator, we need the second step as well as the first step. On Monday nights, as we have the listening and dialogue group, as I mentioned before, and we just finished a series of classes called Gold Mine of Your Mind by Thane. And one of the techniques involves using the 5 W's: what, where, why, who, when. So let's use that with truth. What? Truth is that which is so. Where? Truth, or let's say 2 plus 2 equals 4, is everywhere. When? 2 plus 2 equals 4 was 2 plus 2 equals 4 before the Big Bang, and will be 2 plus 2 equals 4 after the rapture. Why? Because. Who? Is truth subjective as well as objective? Subjectivity is the only way any of us will ever know the truth. We say along with Descartes, I think, therefore I am, as an axiomatic, self-evident truth. I think, therefore I am. So, doing a translation of people, we know that truth is not many, truth is one. We know that truth is one, therefore truth is one person. And I, being a person, am that person. So I am the personification of truth. Another way of saying that is, in Christian Science, there's a statement that truth is infinite mind and its infinite manifestations. Another way of saying that would be truth is infinite mind and its infinite personification. So in that sense, and this is only my opinion, I can think of God as personal. Not anthropomorphic, but personal. And you may not agree, and that's fine. But for me, I see truth as infinite mind and its infinite personification. And being all that is, you are never alone. We are the truth only to the degree that we realize it. And truth is as interested in being realized as we are interested in realizing it. There's a Sufi saying, when you make a step towards God, he makes 10 towards you. From Robert Browning's poem Paracelsus, he says, truth is within ourselves. It takes no rise from outward things, whatever you may believe. There is an inmost center in us all, where truth abides in fullness, and around, wall upon wall, the gross flesh hems it in, this perfect clear perception which is truth. A baffling and perverting carnal mesh binds it and makes all error, and to know rather consists in opening out a way whence the imprisoned splendor may escape, than in effecting entry for a light supposed to be without. And we, in the Prosperos, know a way out. I'm sure there are other ways out, but the tools that we use are translation, Releasing the Hidden Splendor, which takes its name after this poem, and the application of group dynamics. Thinking as a group instead of about it. Behaving as a wave, not a particle. Not always trying to make yourself the best in a group situation, but trying to make everyone else their best. So group dynamics should not just be used in the Find Yourself and Live group or the Listening and Dialogue group. These principles should be used in every aspect of our lives whenever 2 or more are gathered. And that's a group, when 2 or more are gathered. So we need to apply the Hans Bolen rule. If you have something to say, you don't always have to be the one who says it. I was walking down Market Street a couple of days ago, and an elderly woman from maybe Italy or someplace like that was looking for an address, 44 Montgomery Street, and all kinds of people were rushing to help out. And I remember the Hans Bolen rule that, if you have something to say, you don't always have to be the one that says it. So I could see that she was being taken care of, so I walked on my way. So, good for me. But it's out of little fly efforts that eventually we are able to make an elephant effort. And and the Stephen Curry rule as well in whatever group dynamic situations we encounter. Again, that's whenever two or more are gathered, that's a group situation. So in those kind of situations, don't always strive to be the best or the loudest or the leader even. Try to allow others to be their best. I once interviewed for a job with the State Department as a Foreign Service, and they gave us a little test to try to. We had a situation as a group to solve a problem, and so I tried the Hans Bolen rule. You know, if you have something to say, yeah, I don't have to always be the one that says it, but as long as it gets said. And I tried the Stephen Curry rule. Don't always try to be the best. Try to let others be their best. And I didn't make the cut. They thought I was not doing anything. So, you know, too bad for the Foreign Service, I guess. Anyhow, the important thing is that the group consciousness comes up with the solution or the decision or whatever needs to be done, and that's something we have to try very hard to get over, this leadership-centered consciousness that is ruining the world from capitalism on down, from capitalism to your family or even your relationship. Okay, and finally the quantum rule: enjoy being a wave. It's a lot more fun than being a particle. Thank you very much for paying attention to this, and I hope that it works. I hope we can record this and many more in the future. Okay, thanks very much.